of basic supplies, but Gaddafi's men are reportedly using them as human shields. Anti-Gaddafi fighters haven't been able to reach those residential areas. They plan to hold their new game. The battle is far from over. Then another Aljazeera says.
As we mentioned earlier, the current leader of Libya's ruling group appeared at the United Nations General Assembly for the first time in over 40 years. It wasn't Muammar Gaddafi. The chair of Libya's National Executive Committee, Jibril, used the chance to outline his plans for Libya's future. In New York, Scott Hyder was there.
Just a few days after the flag representing the Libyan National Transitional Council was raised in front of the United Nations headquarters, officially bringing to a close the Muammar Gaddafi era in the eyes of the UN, the NEC Executive Committee Chairman addressed the General Assembly.
Today I stand before you after the change to show the world that a new Libya is coming to life. A Libya that looks forward, a Libya that has a view to redevelop itself, a Libya that wants to heal its wounds, a Libya that wants to overcome its pain, that wants to reach out to the entire world, that wants to rebuild itself, to reform its history.
But for the country, where a battle still rages between Libyan forces and Gaddafi loyalists in his hometown of Sirte, it's critical that profound under sanctions to be released.
The assets freeze on our funds must be lifted as quickly as possible. Let me appeal to you from this rostrum. Let the Security Council soon take the historic resolution to lift the freeze. The regime has fallen, even though we have not liberated the entire homeland yet.
Jibril looks also to quickly bring in rule of law.
No political participation is possible without rules for that participation, with rights and obligations. And therefore, a draft constitution to be put to a referendum among the Libyan people is of the utmost importance. We want the rules of participation to be just or govern the dialogue, to give rights to all without discrimination to any individual or group.
So once the last battle is over and the NEC controls all of Libya, the transitional government will begin the difficult task of rebuilding and reintegration, bringing all Libya under one government that represents all Libyans. A feat that won't be easy and that will need money and support. But either Aljazeera at the United Nations.
Look at Yemen now, where at least 18 people have been killed in one of the bloodiest days since the anti-government uprising began. It brings a total death toll to 46 since Friday, when President Aljazeera returned to the country, which is to say government troops fired on a square full of protesters on Saturday, with support from the Hamza.
Scenes of violence and bloodshed greeted the Yemeni president for the second day after his return. Clashes between army units loyal to the president and others opposing him have continued since Friday, with heavy weapons being used and sniper fire across the capital Sanaa. Pro-government troops also closed in on the main city square, where thousands of protesters were gathering overnight. Several people are reported to have been killed, and a fresh video of the ongoing battle showed a number of wounds being treated in hospitals. Aljazeera cannot independently verify the content of these cases. Saleh's prolonged stay in Saudi Arabia for treatment gave false hopes to some that he might relinquish power and allow a peaceful transition in Yemen. But even his absence did not lead to stability, as loyalists in the army, led by his son, continued to defend the regime. The crisis reached a dangerous level when pro-revolution units in the army shifted their allegiance. Upon his return, President Saleh called for an end to violence and for a negotiated settlement. The ACB spoke of a presidential decree ordering the army to clear checkpoints and end the crackdown. On the ground, however, it's not evident those orders have been carried out. Saleh's sudden return surprised his opponents in Yemen. The Americans who've been involved behind the scenes in attempts to secure a smooth transition of power in the country expressed their surprise as well. Just a few days ago, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton met Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal, but the Americans seem to suggest that the Saudis did not inform them of the imminent return of Saleh. Anti-Saleh Yemenis accused both Riyadh and Washington of supporting the regime in Sanaa, which they consider a crucial ally in the fight against Al-Qaeda. They accused the West of adopting double standards by supporting the pro-democracy uprising in Libya, but not in Yemen. Mohammed Al Jazeera.
Turkey's Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan says it's only a matter of time before Syria's President Bashar al-Assad is ousted by his own people. We've also seen the European Union impose more economic sanctions on Syria on Saturday. All the while itself, the demonstrations continue. We cannot independently verify this video. Instead, however, the show of protests in the western city of Homs. Activists say the total death toll since the crackdown began has now risen to 3,000. Over half of voters in Bahrain have been to the polls in parliamentary elections, according to state television, lower than expected, and despite a boycott by the country's opposition. Protesters tried to march from a Shia enclave to the center of the capital, Manama, in response to this election. Security forces fired on them, leading to more clashes. The opposition called the vote fake democracy in action. 18 seats needed to be filled after opposition MPs stepped down in protest earlier in the year. The former Russian president and current Prime Minister Vladimir Putin is confirmed he will run for president again in next year's election. The man who currently has the job, Dmitry Medvedev, proposed that Putin return to the post. The announcement came at the United Russia Party Congress in Moscow, ending years of speculation, and the two men put on a great show of solidarity.
In recent years, the practice has been reformed with the President of the United Russia's candidate. I believe this tradition must not be broken. I propose that the election of the fourth should be led by the current head of state of President Vladimir Medvedev.
Given the proposal to hit the party list, to get involved in party work, and our successful performance in the next election, as well as my readiness to carry out practical work in the government, I believe it would be correct if this Congress supports the candidacy of the party chairman, Vladimir Putin, for the post of President of the country.
President Donald Trump a little bit earlier served as a U.S. diplomat in Moscow, now senior fellow at the Center for Transatlantic Relations. He tells us about Vladimir Putin's announcement and what it really means.
What you're seeing here is, in many ways, a very cynical passing of the presidency back and forth between the boss and one of his assistants, and then back to the boss. And that, of course, undermines constitutionalism and the rule of law in Russia. But he was never really away from the scene. This really puts an end to the illusion of a tandem being sort of a two-headed source of separate powers. Medvedev, in almost every major issue, agreed with Putin. Putin was the ultimate boss, and in many ways, he's merely formalizing or being more public about a role that he has been in the shadows, but nonetheless very powerful in the last 4 or 5 years.
Financial Matters and the International Monetary Fund called on the developed world to act decisively to tackle the ongoing economic crisis. Finance ministers and heads of central banks were in Washington amid all this turmoil in the global market. And it was the US and China both urging European leaders to act now to prevent another debt crisis. This report from Tom Ackerman.
If the delegates of the International Monetary Fund's 154 member countries needed any reminder of the stakes at hand, they got it from the world's shrinking financial markets last week. Even gold and silver, traditional last-ditch havens for investors, suffering price drops in the rush to hoard cash. The IMF, the world's biggest lender of last resort, responded with a pledge to do its part to avert a meltdown.
We'll do what it takes to prevent an escalation of the crisis, escalation of the financial crisis that we face in the weeks and months to come. And then we will also do what it takes to avoid the prospect of a prolonged period of stagnation in the advanced economies.
But the fund demanded that the Eurozone countries fulfill the bold measures its leaders laid out in July, beefing up its rescue fund to its full $600 billion potential from its current $400 billion, and guaranteeing another round of relief to prevent Greece from defaulting.
And it's clearly important that commitments that have been made be delivered upon. So there was a total agreement within the membership today that was the cause. Implement commitments that have been made.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner echoed that line. He urged the European governments to join with the European Central Bank by creating what he called a firewall against further contagion. The EU economics minister assured the IMF that all 17 Eurozone countries will have ratified the rescue package within the next month. but so far only 1/3 of the Eurobloc membership has done so. A test of that pledge will come next week when German Chancellor Angela Merkel puts the crisis measure up for a vote in her parliament. German business groups have warned that if Merkel's own party abandons her, the EU and its common currency will face incalculable consequences, not just in Europe, but in markets around the globe. Tom Ackerman, Aljazeera, Washington.
So we've got the IMF concerned with protecting the world's biggest banks, but for many others it's the banks that are the problem. 80 people, though, were arrested in New York as police shut down a protest against Wall Street financial firm. They call themselves the Occupy Wall Street Project. They're angry about government bank bailout. Caught out by poachers, Sri Lanka says more than $50 million of fish are being lost each and every year, and they're blaming India. Details coming up on that.